एष सुप्तेषु जाग्रति य एष सुप्तेषु जाग्रति कामं 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 कामुषो पुरुषो निर्मिमाणः निर्मिमाणः तदेव शुक्रं तद्ब्रह्मा तदेवामृतमुच्यते तस्मिन् लोकः शतः सर्वे तदूनात्यपि कश्चन एतद्वैत 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 एतद्वैत.
Faculty of the day, Nisag Bhai Trivedi. International Tax Committee Chairman Rajiv Bhai Rawani. Secretary of the branch Nero Bhai Choksi. Regional Coordinator for the program Ashish Bhai Sharma. Regional Council Member Aniket Bhai Talati. Purushottam Bhai Khandelwal. Past Chairman of the branch Sanjay Bhai. All the members in the profession, I welcome you all and very good evening. This is very good to see in the month of vacation and such a huge participation. So it really inspires us and motivates us to do more and more seminars, and that too, the topics which are very relevant and useful. So in the line, on 23rd, we are having the full day we are packed, I would like to say. On 23rd morning, we would be having a open house on TDS, wherein all the practical and technical aspects with regard to TDS would be discussed by none other than from the department itself. The commissioners from the department would be coming, and we would be having the program on open house on the TDS. So I request you all to please join in large number and can take the benefit, because I believe lot many queries, questions and issues are there in TDS. So we would be in a position to interact with the officers from the department, commissioners. On the same day, we are having a very relevant topic, full day seminar on ICFR. That would be from 2:30 in the afternoon till 8:30 in the evening. And the faculties were again the top notch from the country. Khushru Pantki from GT, Mumbai, Sanjay Bantia from Delhi, and Nikhil Kohli from Delhi again. So all these three faculties are there. On 28th, service tax series we are launching. That would be a 7-day series with 14 CPRs. And the best part that we have, this is a kind of new innovation, I would like to say, that for the young members, the fee that we are charging would be lesser. So we have demarcated one particular number, 138700, something like that. All the members who are younger to that number would be having special pricing for that. On 29th, we are having a seminar on Caro by MC Gupta. On 30th, we are having a peer review program, and I would like to request the members to register in large numbers. The reason being, anyone who is in continuous practice for 10 years have the opportunity to be appointed as the peer reviewer. You would be eligible for the empanelment. But for that, 1-day program has to be attended. And this program is being done in Ahmedabad, I believe, almost after 5 years. So I would request to please take the opportunity. As on the date, there are almost 200 peer reviewers in Ahmedabad against 2,000 chartered accountant firms. So it would also be providing opportunity, and not only opportunity in terms of money, but to learn the good practices, best practices of the various other our chartered accountants. Then on 1st of May, we are having another program on health, ergonomics. Most, or I would say many of us are suffering from various physical disorders because of the working on computers and all these, our postures and all these. So from Mission Health, Dr. Alap Shah is coming, and he would be guiding us what kind of postures to be used so that there are less complications, the cervical pain and all these things. So I would request to join you in large number, and many more programs are being lined up. If I take all these, maybe for the next 15 days program, then I would need another 10 to 15 minutes, and I don't want to stand much between the faculty and you. So I request Rajiv Bhai to please take the charge further. Thank you. And yes, one more important announcement. Cricket tournament is going to be held in the month of May again, and that I need to specially mention. The reason being, lot many phone calls are being received for cricket tournament. Every day I used to receive at least one call. So just for your information, in the month of May, maybe in the end of May, and very soon we'll be coming out with the circular, maybe in the next week. Thank you, friends.
Good evening, friends. As the chairman Vikas Jain said, your presence is our inspiration. And it is really evident from today's presence that the branch functioning is always having the inspiration by the members, as the branch is for the members, for the service of the members, and we are here to serve you all. I, as the chairman of the International Tax Committee and the managing committee member, welcome you all. I feel extremely pleased by this vast presence and the participation. One of the reasons also being the today's topic, which is touching up each and every professional, each and every, even the staff, article clerks, because they are also supposed to handle these issues day in and day out. At the outset, I welcome today's faculty, C. Nisik Trivedi. I acknowledge the presence and support of Chairman, Mr. Vikas Jain, and Secretary, Mr. Neerav Choksi. I also acknowledge today the presence of the RCMs present over here, Mr. Purushottam Khandelwal and Mr. Aniket Talati. I acknowledge the teamwork of my International Tax Committee member, and this being the first meeting, I would like members at large to know the names at least without going into the biodatas, etc., of the International Tax Committee that has been formed, who will be working throughout the tenure for the service of the members. The co-chairman is Mr. Rutul Shah, convener is Ashish Sharma, other members are Arpit Jain, Atit Shah, Chintan Shah, Jatin Gajjar, Kishore Goel, Rohan Popat, Rutvij Shah, Soumya Seth, Vishal Langalia, Neerav Patel, and Ankit Shah. At this stage, I should also take you through certain facts about the working of the branch with the permission of the chairman. I have to say, and I'm really proud and feeling happy to be part of this present managing committee member, headed by the chairman, Mr. Vikas Jain, for his continuous, uninterrupted effort that he has been putting in arranging the various affairs, including the various programs of the branch for the benefit of the members. Thank you. That was also evident while the function of the felicitation of the president, and that function also through the support, I mean, almost I cannot describe in words the support that was given by the RCMs present over here, Purushottam ji and Aniket ji, because that was a gigantic task to do. That is the honor of the president of our alma mater, our institute. International tax practice, as we have generally perceived, all of us, generally we see through it as a far away destination, a kind of the thing which is probably being entered into, being practiced by a certain limited number of chartered accountants. But as I have been understanding international tax, it is not the case. It is not so. The present topic, 15 CACB, may be something which is of day-to-day usage, but beyond that also, there are, I mean to say, a variety of opportunities and also the challenges, and challenges also brings the opportunity throughout this particular area of practice. As we all know, the process of economic liberalization, as we popularly say, economic reforms, started way back in 1991 by Dr. Manmohan Singh. This is what we generally understand, but rather when we are talking of an international concept, we need to know that the economic liberalization started in the countries like China, Russia, certain socialist and communist countries, also way back in 1980s. And hence the resultant certain small European countries which were socialist, even Britain to a certain extent up to 1980, had socialist culture. Lot many of industries were the nationalized industries which were privatized by Margaret Thatcher. And then the approach towards capitalism started. Along with that particular approach of capitalism, the economies, the cross-border transactions, the inter-economy business started in a big way. And hence the process of economic liberalization. Along with the economic liberalization came also the regime of, you may say, tax reforms. And hence the resultant, as we all know, OECD, DTAA, transfer pricing, cross-border taxation, and to the latest, as we say, GAR, POEM, as we say, now the latest concepts of BEPS, that is base erosion and profit shifting rather. So learning international taxation is a day-to-day process now, just like as we are learning the, the topics relating to other areas of practice. We at the International Tax Committee, in consultation with the chairman, have decided to see through that all the basic areas of practice relating to international taxation, relating to NRI taxation, relating to establishment of business and the relevant tax implications cross-border, whether it is Singapore, learning the treaties, etc., on a day-to-day basis requirement, rather going into the technicalities, which eventually is the program schedule. We have decided to go ahead with such kind of programs. Coming to today's topic, that is 15 CA, CB and section 195, considering the fact that already the full cloud is waiting for Nisarg to deliver, I'm not going to speak much on that. But before handing over the mic to Ashish for giving the formal introduction of Nisarg, I would also like to acknowledge the presence of Harit, my co-managing committee member, as I am able to see right now, who is also there with us. And last but not the least, I thank you all for this wonderful presence, and I wish that such a kind of response continue with all the programs of the branch, including this new topics, the topics which are concerning the international tax, be there throughout the tenure. Thank you so much. Thank you for your patience hearing. Bye-bye.
Chairman sir, Secretary sir, my colleagues on the dais, off the dais, dear members, good evening. The presence only shows that how deep 15 CACB runs into our business. I'm here to introduce our speaker over here today for the evening, Mr. Nisarg Trivedi. Nisarg Trivedi has cleared his CA in 2008 and had 21st rank in his PE2 examination. Presently, he is working with Dhruva Advisors LLP as manager and specializes in the field of domestic and international taxation, with emphasis on cross-border transactions and regulatory laws with respect to inbound and outbound investments. He has also assisted many clients in field of merger and acquisitions, listing of companies, and also on transfer pricing. He regularly gives lecture at various branches and also on international taxation course organized by ICI. So I'm sure he's the perfect faculty for the evening. I would now request CA Vikas Jain and Rajiv Bhai to felicitate Mr. Nisarg Trivedi with a bouquet and a memento. Neerav Bhai. Before handing over the podium to Mr. Nisarg Trivedi, I was discussing with him how to approach with today's lecture. Now, as I talked with him, Mr. Nisarg is comfortable if you ask questions in between, but relevant to the topic which is already made him understand through the PPT. So instead of going and waiting till the end of the lecture, will be throughout the lecture will be if you have certain questions or queries will be you can ask him, but only relevant to the topics which is already covered. Otherwise, it will be a chaos. I'll just hand over the proceedings to Mr. Nisarg. Thank you.
Good evening, all. Say, today's topic is probably very relevant considering the time that we are into. Issues vis-a-vis the remittance under Section 195 and practical aspects of the Form 15 CSCAB, which has been recently revised. Probably. So, the way I propose to take up the whole session in this way, that I have divided the whole presentation into 6 aspects. First, we'll take up some overview of Section 195. Then we'll have some analysis of the whole section 195 from 191 to 195.6. Then how do you approach the withholding tax considering that 206 AA? What are the consequences of non-compliance? What is the process of remittance, where we'll probably cover up the practical challenges that we face for 15 CSCB. I've highlighted certain points for the new revised Form 15 CSCB, probably we'll touch upon that. And then we'll also have certain 10 case studies, which are very small. So first, overview. See, this Section 195, there has been a clarificatory circular issue dated 27 November 1974, which says that like any withholding provisions, 195 is also a provisional tax. This is probably not a final tax, not a final assessment. The intention of living or having Section 195 is to just to maintain that tax has been collected via payment has been made from India. So that especially this very much relevant for the non-resident aspect, because normally non-resident do not have any presence or assets anything in India. So it becomes practically very difficult when the payment has already been done and for the government to trace that person to collect any taxes. Probably we'll have someone to arrange this. Yeah. So the whole Section 195 has been divided into 6 sections, Section 1 to 6. Each and every section has certain relevance. 195 talks about the scope and chargeability of or the condition on the applicability. 195 to 195.3 and also the 197 provides a option or probably a leeway for the taxpayer, maybe on the recipient or the payee side. Where they payee and payer will have an option to get a certificate or kind of approval from the tax officer to either withhold tax at a lower rate, or maybe remit the amount without any kind of taxation. Similar provision is there under section 197, which will cover upon. Validity of certificate, which has been, that's 195, that is subsection 4. Subsection 5 gives a power to CBDT to notify that what is the process for how they will monitor the 195.3 transactions. I believe that till now nothing has been done on that. Always the circular or the rules have been issued, probably rules have been issued under section 195.3 only. 195 is the grossing up mechanism, how it will really work when you have to make a payment to a non-resident, where you are supposed to gross up and bear the taxes that otherwise would have been borne by the other party. Overview of section 195. See, this is basically a withholding tax mechanism on the payment by a resident to a non-resident, also by a non-resident to non-resident, where the income is chargeable to tax in India. Government interestingly uses withholding tax to collect this portion of tax. So this should not be construed as final tax that the other party was supposed to pay in India. Normally you will see that the final tax, especially the 115 rates, will coincide with the rates that has been prescribed reading section 237 for the rates in force that has been given in the schedule and tables. But this is not the, so probably one can say there is a coincidence, and government has been making a conscious effort to have both the rates coincide. But this is not the intention that just by withholding a tax, the foreigner is completely absorbed from his liability to pay tax in India, or even to file a tax return in India. There are certain exceptions for let's say 115A or 115G that we'll touch upon. Only those two sections, 115A subsection 5 and section 115G, which provides a benefit to a non-resident, and 115A5 gives a benefit to a recipient being a non-resident who is receiving mainly a dividend or interest income on which tax has been withheld in India. Those two category of people will be eligible to receive income, and they are not supposed to file tax return in India because the tax has been appropriately withheld. People sometimes misconstrue that even a royalty or fees for technical service transaction on which due tax has been deducted in India, the non-resident is not supposed to file tax return in India. But that's not the case, because section 115A provides a benefit only for particular transaction, which is mainly a dividend and interest income transaction, not for royalty, not for fees for technical services. 195 does not apply to, let's say, transaction of certain interest payments, 194 LB, LC, that ECB, all those payments which are otherwise specifically covered under separate sections. Unlike other provisions of chapter 17, section 195 uses certain different terminologies. Let's say it starts with any person responsible for paying any sum, and then uses a special phrase which can be chargeable to tax under the Act. Now, if you see normal our sections, let's say 194C, 194J, 194I, those are very specific sections which prescribe that what is the income that they are going to tax. Here it is saying that any sum chargeable to tax. So there is the first differentiation that you will see for 195 as compared to other normal provisions, which are mainly for payment to resident by a resident or maybe by a non-resident. All payers are covered even under section 195, let it be an individual or HUF. There would be I would say, a bit of multidimensionality involved, because you have to read, let's say, DTAA, or probably what we call as a treaty between two countries, where you actually analyze any transaction under section 195, which is not the case for any other provisions, 194C or J. Interestingly, instruction has been issued, which is instruction number 2, 2014, which says that SSC who does not withhold with all the taxes under section 195, he'll be considered as assessee in default. See, probably this instruction has been issued to make sure that the tax officers takes cognizant of this provision. Maybe they would have been under impression that proper administration has not been done for putting a point on whether the person can be considered as assessee in default where there has been a non-deduction on his portion. Section 195, subsection 1, the overview could be that it's basically a payment made to a non-resident. That's the primary condition. That includes all kind of residents, whether they are having any presence in India or not.
ना ना ये चेक नहीं करा आपको लैपटॉप लिया है प्रतीक भैया अनादि दादा मैं जरा स्पीड चालू कर करा अनादि का पूछा अनादि का नहीं था प्रतीक आई जाते
Probably they are setting up some new different laptop on this. Meanwhile, we'll continue. So, okay. When a payment is made to a non-resident, so under section 195, we'll cover up all the payments which are covered under, which are probably payment made to a non-resident. That is first. Now, what are payment made to resident? Let's say there is a foreign company. Any payments that you make, even to a foreign company, that would be covered under section 195. That is the thing to be remembered. Though the next would be, what is the status of a non-resident? This would be determined as per section 6. Let's say theoretically there's a foreign company. Because of the subsection 6 of section 6, the poem concept, that foreign company becomes a resident. Probably whether you will apply section 195 or not, that controversy will take up. What are the payments? Those are covered. So the section is in a way very clear that any payment that is chargeable to tax in India would be covered. There are a couple of decisions, let's say Samsung, which was Kerala High Court, Karnataka High Court, which has been rendered some interesting observation, which has been finally, I would say, settled by Supreme Court decision in case of G. Now, at what time TDS has to be deducted? So TDS, as we have under normal provision of chapter 17, TDS has to be deducted at the time of payment or credit, whichever is earlier. Now the rate, what is the rate that you will apply? So rate would be as per the rates in force given in section 2 subsection 37 for the purpose of TDS, which also covers probably the whole chapter 17B including 195. Section 195 is being worded bit differently than the normal sections. It says that any person responsible for paying to a non-resident or a foreign company any sum chargeable to tax under the Act is required to deduct tax at the rates in force. So first, any person. So the responsibility has been casted on any person. Person, as we know that it has been defined under section 2, subsection 31 of the IT Act, which will basically cover a non-resident because person per se does not differentiate between the resident and a non-resident. So theoretically, let's say a non-resident making payment to another non-resident, those transactions can be tested under section 195 as per the first limb. Whether that sum is chargeable to tax or not, that probably one has to take care. Further, an explanation has been inserted, explanation 2, which with a retrospective effect, which clarifies that obligation to comply with the provision of section 195 is also casted on a non-resident. So, as I said, that if a non-resident is also making a payment to another non-resident, those transactions has been implied to be covered under 195. There are people, taking a view that earlier a payment made by a non-resident to any other non-resident should not be covered, but that controversy has been put to rest by retrospective amendment. પણ આમાં આટલું જ દેખાય.
માસ્ટર ઓપન ટર્ન
I think this is fine. sorry. Sorry. I think we'll bear with this. So we are on rates in force. As we discussed, rates in force has been defined as section 2 subsection 37. For the purpose of TDS, it says that rates as prescribed under particular, let's say, a schedule, or maybe you can also refer to the DTAA, whichever is more beneficial. There has been many decisions on this. The famous one is the MFAR hotels of the Kochi Tribunal. Probably we discussed on this. I'll skip this. 195.1, the chargeability, you have to see, let's say, section 5 read with section 911, 912, all those things. Probably your salary would not be covered under 195. Yes. 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 See, when you make a payment to a foreign branch, so yes, so let's say SBI in India has a branch abroad, so that's a payment. Yeah. So what would be the status of the foreign branch for Indian tax purpose? It will be still be considered as a resident. So this section 1, it will not be covered. Only. So earlier we had some interesting thing that bank never insisted Form 15 CSEB. Now we have some different. Yeah, but strictly speaking, section 195 will not, yeah. To be see, yes, 195 will apply whether if it is see whether those transactions are covered somewhere else, because probably it would be an interest or not. I'm putting a very different scenario. Let's say we are paying, let's say a Citibank has a branch in India, and let's say they are collecting bank charges, which are not covered anywhere else. So whether section 195 will apply? Answer would be yes, 195 would apply. But I have never, so banks never insist, 115 CSEB on such kind of transaction. Actually, they're deducted. So you will come to notice of the bank charges normally when you receive the statement, where amount has already been collected. So this observation, many clients of ours has also been asking us, but to the extent, they'll probably, I had an interaction with one bank, which has a foreign bank having a branch in India. So they said, will not allow you to deduct any kind of TDS. So that matter is pending, but normally they don't allow, which is probably a wrong practice. Either, I've never seen probably 2-3 banks I have interacted, they don't allow us to deduct TDS on the bank charges. Similarly, what you said that SBI will not be having, will not be considered as a non-resident. Well, let's say Citibank, your case. Citibank, Indian branch, it's a non-resident. But, so theoretically, we should have 15 CSEB, but the point is, if they don't allow it, probably what will you do? The controversy will come to later on that whether that P that P will have income chargeable to tax on India. But I'm just on the section 195%. The answer would be yes. Yes, sir. No, the foreign bank will have to apply under section 197 for lower deduction. CA will be an issue. There are many areas of litigation on this. I'll try to cover a few of them. What is the sum chargeable to tax? Now, very interesting decision, probably very detailed analysis made by Supreme Court Transmission Corporation. See here, probably will not go into much detail because we have lost few times on this. So in this case, the argument was that when you make a payment, not the whole sum is chargeable to tax. Probably certain income is probably an expense for the recipient. So let's say a trading income. So his income portion would be out of 100, maybe 5%, 10%. So whether in this case, you will apply section 195 on the whole 100 rupees, or you will actually ask him what is your profit, or probably what is the income out of that 100. In this case, Supreme Court categorically made a detailed analysis and said that you have to make, section is very clear. Now, you cannot go into what is the bifurcation between what is the income of that person, because that requires a detailed analysis. And so they are saying what is chargeable to tax is the whole 100 is chargeable to tax. What is the profit element could be a matter of litigation, probably matter of accounting and everything that he has to do it. But the income remains 100. His profit could be 5 or maybe even a loss. So the payer should not be concerned on what amount of income he is going to earn out of the whole transaction. So Transmission Corporation, Supreme Court categorically held that on the whole sum which is chargeable to tax in India, you have to deduct TDS. Samsung Electronics, this was probably maybe a decision which has finally been overruled. Just to summarize in this, this decision said that for all the payments, you have to have a certificate from assessing officer. You cannot pay an amount to a non-resident without deducting tax. Either you deduct tax if you are sure, if you believe that no amount is chargeable to tax out of this payment, then the only option you have as an SSE is to obtain a certificate either in the section 195(2) or 195(3). But you just cannot make a payment to a non-resident without deduction of tax, even after obtaining 15 CACV. This decision probably, not a good law. This has been finally reversed by GE India, which is after Samsung, and which has categorically denied that. And which is probably, I would say, the whole ratio that has been laid by the Transmission Corporation has been reiterated in GE Corporation, GE India Technology. Now, point of tax withholding. As we discussed, that tax has to be deducted at the time of credit or payment, whichever is earlier. Now, let's say, I would say there are a couple of interesting decisions on this aspect. Indian company was making a payment of royalty or fees for technical services to the foreign company. Let's say that amount is chargeable to tax in India because it's a pure royalty. Now, if you read, let's say, India-US treaty or India-UK treaty, it says that whenever royalty is being paid by an Indian company to a foreign company, you need to deduct, the tax shall be, let's say, 10%. Interestingly, the words used in most of the treaty are, where the amount is paid. In certain decisions, couple of them, SSE took a view that, I have booked an expense, but I have not paid the amount to the non-resident. So basis the Article 12 or 13 of the respective treaty, this amount is not chargeable to tax in India. I'll deduct TDS probably next year, where actually I'll pay. So let's say transaction has happened in year 1. You will claim an expense in year 1. You will not deduct TDS because relying on the treaty, that amount has not been paid. So in year 2, you will deduct TDS while you make a payment. So you will have that cushion of utilizing that 10% amount for your business. Interestingly, first it was a flagged AAR decision. Then after we had decision of Siemens, Bombay High Court, which is probably still not reported, I guess. This is the only High Court decision which has considered this aspect. After that, there was a Johnson & Johnson decision of Mumbai Tribunal, which has relied on the Siemens Bombay High Court. None of the decision has considered the definition of paid which has been given under section 43(2) of the Income Tax Act, which says that paid means actually paid, or basis the normal accounting principle that you follow. So let's say if an Indian company will have to follow a mercantile accounting system, so expense will be booked, but this argument has not been, so I'm saying for the income tax purpose, amount will be considered as paid. But since it is actually not paid, interestingly, treaty doesn't define word paid. See, normally if a term has not been defined, you will actually fall back to the domestic law to get a meaning out of it. But somehow department has never taken this argument that paid has been defined under the Income Tax Act. Since paid somehow has not been defined, you will fall back and take the meaning from the Income Tax Act. This aspect has not been considered. Maybe I won't fully agree with this decision unless there is a contrary decision, or maybe a decision which considers the definition of paid under the Act, which is probably very clear. And even mercantile basis, when you book an expense, it is considered to be paid. One can think of a case, because let's say I'm making a payment which does not fall into business income. As per treaty, it falls as an other income. So for that other income article, will you again go back to the Income Tax Act? Because Income Tax Act defines 43(2) paid under section 43(2) for the purpose of PGBP, not for other, let's say, income from other sources. Interestingly, I have not seen any other income article of any treaty which uses the word paid. Now, other income, let's say, I can recall a treaty, probably Singapore Treaty, which does not use normal terms like income arises in Singapore. So this is income of Singapore. So whether you can impute this definition that income will be considered income when paid, maybe, or probably someone can actually go into a treaty where other income article also says that income arises only when the income is paid. Interesting, probably we'll have to wait and see. Certain interesting decisions were rendered. Let's say you require an RBI approval. This was more relevant, probably I would say, under the earlier FERA regime, not more so under a FEMA regime. Siemens says that since the amount has not been paid in this financial year, you are not supposed to deduct TDS. You will take the treaty benefit, not withhold any tax. In the year 2, when you make a payment, you deduct TDS. See, someone can actually think of there is probably an arrangement of having funding from foreign company. You already have a transaction with your foreign company. Still, you want a funding from the foreign company. The simplest way is not to pay for certain time and play around, probably take a view on this for a limited period of time. Let's say first case, sorry, this was not intentional. Mr. Vijay Mallya had to receive guarantee commission at that time from his company. Now, under FERA, section 8 had some exemptions, or maybe specific or general exemptions. Under FERA regime, many restrictions were there. For a guarantee commission transaction, you need to have either a general exemption or a specific exemption. Otherwise, you cannot enter into, you cannot just pay that amount to a non-resident. That was the regime at that time. Now, United Beverages had to pay some guarantee commission to Mr. Vijay Mallya. Now, so argument from the SSC side was that under RBI, you require an approval. My approval is pending at RBI at the end of the year. So this income is not chargeable. So no withholding provision should apply. To which probably Karnataka High Court said that there are two distinctions. Section 8 of FERA and Section 9 of FERA. Section 8 says that you require a general or a specific exemption to make the payment. It does not restrict that the transaction cannot be done. So the High Court observed that such transaction is actually an expense. Only thing is your payment is deferred subject to RBI's approval. So you in year one, when you book an expense, you will have to deduct TDS because this is not an uncertain transaction. The crystallization of the event of booking an expense has happened once the year end. Your guarantee is invoked or whatever would be the term of the guarantee commission. Now, second, there was an interesting decision of Motor Industries, where probably Bosch GmbH, the German company, had to receive some royalty. And again, at that time, for certain royalty, you require an approval from central government. So that agreement was in dispute with the central government on probably what would be the rate that foreign company can receive as a royalty. So the argument from the SSC side was that this amount is not crystallized. Though I am booking an expense basis the whatever proposal that we have, but this is not an expense crystallized in the year because it still requires an approval from RBI, central government. If central government denies, then probably there is no expense. But for books of accounts, I am booking this as an expense. The Kerala High Court, agreed with the view of the SSC that this is a thing that you require an approval of central government before so to conclude the agreement. Till the time the agreement was not signed or maybe not approved by the central government, you cannot actually enforce the agreement. So basis this, they said that this amount you can remit on this expense, which are booked as a right now a provisional expense. You did not deduct any TDS on this. Pfizer Chemicals probably a bit different on section 8, which says that you require a previous approval. In this case, they said that since you require a previous approval to enter into the transaction, this amount will not be allowed as an expense. There was probably a payment of dividend on this. Tax to be withheld even when no remittance on adjustment of dues. Let's say I'm supposed to receive something from the foreign party and he's supposed to pay something to me. So if I square up the transaction, still TDS liability will arise. There was a decision of probably Kanchenjunga Seafoods which says that even payment in kind, probably in barter kind of scenario, you will still require to deduct TDS on probably the market value of the amount that you are booking as an income or expense, as the case may be. Reimbursement, the most probably unclear area on one side. There are many litigations on this portion. Now, pure reimbursement, let's say there is an expense incurred on your behalf, the foreign party is providing you the proof, they are just channelizing the whole transaction. Then probably one can easily take an argument that these are the pure reimbursement which does not have any income character into it, and therefore no TDS is required to be withheld. There are many decisions, some are in favor and some are against. Probably one can say that, let's say if there is an income, let's say you are making a payment of royalty or fees for technical services, or let's say a management support fees, and then you are taking a view that there is some amount of reimbursement into it, then it becomes very difficult because there is an income attached to the expense, and says it would be very difficult for us to bifurcate between an income and reimbursement. Also, it becomes very difficult on the SSC side that what would be the, so just to prove that this expense is purely reimbursement. So in this case you will probably deduct TDS on the whole amount, and where you have or maybe you can have two separate invoices, have some separate arrangement for the reimbursement, and in that case probably one can argue that these are pure reimbursement where the supporting has been provided and I'm not deducting any TDS on that. Third party.
And ultimately, indirectly, it is providing service to our company only. So whether we would be required to deduct TDS on that amount.
So if I understand correctly,
I'm giving you an example. If I have a consultant in USA and he is taking service of a lawyer in US only, whatever fees he is paying to that lawyer.
So probably that is not a reimbursement per se. See, take a reverse case. That lawyer would have provided you service directly. whether that amount was chargeable to tax in India or not. Probably, it becomes very difficult because for you, the point of contact service provider is that X person, not the lawyer. So you cannot have a bifurcation like this. Probably, where this is not actually, I would say, a reimbursement per se. What we are looking for, this reimbursement for him. Let's say this is not a reimbursement for us. We have actually taken a service through someone. That's it. So this is not actually a reimbursement for us.
What if while providing his services, he had to take the service of that lawyer? And it was not
Correct.
part of that lawyer was not indirectly providing services to us. He was providing services to US person.
No, the lawyer was indirectly providing services to you only. Maybe there was a channelizing arrangement, probably, when let's say we have an arrangement where I will provide service to someone where I'll use 5 other people as a service provider. But for you, I am the service provider. Whatever I give it to you, probably it's pure service income for me. That's not probably a case of reimbursement. Would be a case, let's say, there's an Indian company, there's a foreign company. Indian company employees travels to foreign company. Now for local boarding, lodging, travels and everything, those expenses are being paid by the foreign entity because those arrangements had to be done by them. So I'm saying this would clearly fall as a reimbursement. These are reimbursement of cost. Cases of reimbursement on cost of services of third party, probably what we said. This reimbursement was considered taxable. Probably what you are saying, this is the same Wallace Pharma. Cases of reimbursement of allocation of cost. Allocation cost sharing, probably we have a divergent view. There are many courts and courts saying that sorry. So in case of cost sharing, probably it would become very difficult to sustain before the authority that these are actually costs which are being shared, because your allocation key on basis, let's say there is a large MNC group which has presence in 10 countries. They incur a common expense for all the 10 entities, and they actually allocate the expense on some allocation key to various countries. Or in that case, this is a pure cost allocation. But even someone argues that this is not an income, but probably your allocation key per se challenged by the tax department. So in this case, it's better to deduct TDS unless you are very sure that this cost allocation is based on the only appropriate key. Let's say you have taken a service which can be which is actually linked to your employees, and the per company employee